"You're worthless." The words echoed through the store like thunder. The young man's head dropped in silence, his heart breaking. That powerful man didn't know he'd just humiliated a genius. And soon, this very young man would hold his crumbling empire in his hands. The morning started with the deafening screech of tires in the parking garage. Samuel Carter stepped out of his black Lexus, his face carved with irritation. At 62, he was the kind of man who made sure everyone knew he had power. The custom-tailored Italian suit, the Swiss watch worth more than a sedan, the leather shoes polished to a mirror shine even in the dim garage light. But that Tuesday morning, none of it could hide the storm brewing inside him. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," the security guard at the entrance greeted, pulling the glass door open with practiced reverence. Samuel walked straight past without a glance. His mind churned with the disastrous meeting from the night before. He'd lost a major contract he'd been working on for months, an international distribution deal. Millions slipping through his fingers because, according to the foreign investors, his grocery chain was outdated and technologically behind the times. Outdated. The word hammered in his skull like a personal insult. He had built this empire from nothing. Started with a corner store in Brooklyn 40 years ago and, through relentless work and ruthless decisions, transformed it into a chain of 5 upscale supermarkets spread across the best neighborhoods of New York. How dare they call him outdated? His phone vibrated in his pocket. His wife, probably wanting to know when he'd be home. He declined the call without looking. No patience for conversation. Not now. He strode through the main corridor of the flagship store, his eyes scanning every detail with predatory focus. This was his method. Show up unannounced, inspect everything, search for mistakes, keep the employees on edge, always afraid. Fear was respect, in Samuel Carter's philosophy. That's when he saw him. In the imported wine section, a lean young man in the store's light green uniform was rearranging bottles on the shelves. It wasn't the way he did the work that caught Samuel's attention. It was how focused the kid seemed, studying each label before positioning the bottle, as if there were some specific logic to the arrangement. Samuel's irritation found a target. "What are you doing?" His voice came out sharp, echoing through the entire section. The young man turned, startled. He couldn't have been older than 20. His face still held traces of boyhood, dark eyes that showed intelligence. In his hands, he held a bottle of French Bordeaux. "Good morning, sir. I'm reorganizing the wine section according to the instructions from—" "Instructions?" Samuel cut him off, stepping closer. "Who gave you instructions to mess with this?" "The manager, sir. He asked me to organize by region and vintage, making it easier for customers who—" "Easier?" Samuel's voice rose even higher. Other employees began appearing at the ends of the aisles, curious. Some customers slowed their pace, sensing the beginning of a scene. "You think you know better than me about how to organize my store?" Daniel Hayes swallowed hard. He recognized the owner from photos posted in the employee break room. His heart raced, but he kept his voice steady and respectful. "No, sir. Just following the directions I received." "Wrong directions. Look at this." Samuel snatched the bottle from the young man's hand and gestured toward the shelf. "You mixed French with Italian. Put different vintages side by side. This is a mess." Actually, it wasn't. Daniel had organized the bottles by flavor profile and food pairing, a method he'd learned studying sommeliers online. But he realized explaining would only make things worse. "I apologize, sir. I'll reorganize." "Apologize?" Samuel let out a bitter laugh. "Do you know how much each of these bottles costs? Do you know how much I lose when a customer can't find what they're looking for because some incompetent decided to play shelf designer?" The word incompetent landed like a slap. Diane Crawford, the section supervisor, came running, her face flushed with anxiety. "Mr. Carter, it's my fault. I'm the one who asked Daniel to—" "Shut your mouth!" Samuel exploded, making Diane recoil as if she'd taken a physical blow. "I don't want to hear about whose genius idea it was. I want to know how I'm paying salaries to people who can't even do the basics." A small crowd had formed. 3 customers watched with expressions ranging between embarrassment and morbid curiosity. 7 employees stood nearby, all avoiding direct eye contact with the scene but unable to ignore it. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," Samuel ordered, and Daniel obeyed, raising his gaze. "How old are you?" 19, sir. 19. And what do you know about running a business? What do you know about high-end customers? What do you know about anything besides pushing boxes from one place to another? Each question was a calculated humiliation. Samuel knew exactly what he was doing. He was channeling all the frustration from the lost meeting, all the rage at being called outdated, all the helplessness of watching his empire threatened. And Daniel was the perfect target. Young, powerless to defend himself, invisible enough to be crushed without consequences. I try to do my job the best way I can, sir, Daniel answered quietly without breaking eye contact. Try? Samuel stepped so close that Daniel could smell the expensive cologne. I don't pay people to try. I pay them to do, and you clearly don't know how to do even the basics. Mr. Carter, Diane tried again, her voice trembling. Daniel is one of our best employees. He's never had a single. Best employee? Samuel's explosion made even the lights seem to flicker. If this is the best you've got, then I'm bankrupt. He turned to the group watching, employees and customers mixed together, and spread his arms in a theatrical gesture. You see this? This is how you people want to work? Doing everything half-baked? Thinking any garbage will do? Absolute silence. Nobody dared breathe loudly. Samuel returned his attention to Daniel, who remained standing, hands at his sides, expression serene despite the storm. You, he pointed a finger at the young man's chest, are not fit to work here. Actually, you're not fit to work anywhere that requires even a minimum of intelligence. The words cut like sharp blades. Diane closed her eyes, feeling second-hand shame. Some employees looked at the floor. An elderly customer shook her head in disapproval and walked away, muttering something about lack of manners. But Daniel didn't cry, didn't yell back, didn't run away. He just took a deep breath and responded, maintaining the respectful tone his mother had always taught him. I understand, sir. I'm sorry for causing trouble. I'll reorganize however you prefer. The calm response seemed to irritate Samuel even more. He expected a reaction, a desperate excuse, maybe tears, something to confirm his superiority. But that skinny kid in the worn uniform maintained a dignity that didn't fit the situation. You didn't understand anything, Samuel growled. You know what your generation's problem is? You think you deserve everything without working, without trying hard, without respecting those who actually built something in life. The words made no sense. Daniel worked 12 hours a day, studied through the night, helped his mother with expenses. But he understood this wasn't about him. It was about something bigger he couldn't comprehend. Mr. Carter, Edward Walsh, the general manager, finally appeared, sweating nervously. Could we discuss this in the office? Discuss what, Edward? About how you hire incompetence? About how you let my store turn into chaos? Sir, with all due respect, Daniel is punctual, hard-working, never had a single complaint. Until today, Samuel cut him off. But today he showed who he really is. And I don't want this type of employee in my company. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Are you firing him? Diane asked, her voice barely audible. Samuel looked at Daniel, at the dark eyes that stared back without hatred, without rage, just with a deep calm that bothered him profoundly. No, he said finally, surprising everyone. I'm not going to fire him. I'm going to leave him here as an example of what not to be, an example of mediocrity. He turned to leave but stopped, looking at everyone present. And this goes for all of you. If you don't want to end up like this kid here, a nobody who'll spend his whole life pushing boxes, you better start taking work seriously. He left with heavy steps, leaving behind a trail of embarrassment and tension. The employees slowly dispersed, avoiding looking at Daniel. Diane approached, tears in her eyes. Daniel, I'm so sorry. I never imagined that. It's okay, Diane, he said softly, picking up the wine bottle that had fallen to the floor during the argument. Fortunately, it hadn't broken. It wasn't your fault. But it was so unfair. You were doing excellent work. I'm the one who asked you to organize that way because you understand wine better than anyone here. I know, but there's no point arguing now. I'll reorganize the traditional way. Edward approached, his expression a mix of anger and helplessness. Daniel, I apologize. Samuel was completely out of control. He never acts like this. Usually he's just difficult. I understand, Mr. Walsh. No, you don't understand. The manager lowered his voice. He's under tremendous pressure. Business isn't going well. There's new competition, investors demanding results. But that doesn't justify what he did to you. Daniel nodded, but said nothing. What could he say? That he was used to humiliation? That he grew up poor and invisible, accustomed to being treated as less? That this wasn't the first time someone called him incompetent, stupid, a failure? No, he wouldn't say any of that. Can I get back to work? Was all he asked. Edward sighed, defeated. You can. And Daniel, if you want to look for another job, I'd understand. I can even give you a letter of recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Walsh, but I need this job. I know. Your mother. Yes, my mother. Daniel returned to the wine section and began reorganizing the bottles the traditional way. Alphabetical by country, nothing about intelligent pairings or flavor profiles. Simple and boring, just as Samuel wanted. His hands worked automatically while his mind flew elsewhere. He thought about his mother, Grace, who at that exact moment was probably on her knees scrubbing someone's floor in the Upper East Side. He thought about how she'd come home with her back aching, knees marked, hands chapped from so much chemical product. And even so, she would smile, ask about his day, thank God for the opportunity to work, to have health, to support her son through college. College. Daniel looked at the backpack propped in the corner of the section, where he carried 3 technical engineering books, a notebook full of equations and projects, and the old laptop he used for programming. Nobody there knew. Nobody imagined that the incompetent wine stalker was the top student in computer engineering at Columbia University, that professors called him a prodigy, that a project of his had caught the attention of a tech company. Nobody knew because he didn't tell them, not out of modesty, but protection. He'd learned early that revealing too much about yourself attracted envy, provoked uncomfortable questions, created expectations. It was easier to be invisible. Hey, Daniel, Julio the bagger called out, approaching timidly. You okay? I'm fine. Man, that was heavy. The old man humiliated you in front of everybody. It was just a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Julio lowered his voice. The guy called you stupid, incompetent, said you're not good for anything. How can you stay so calm? Daniel stopped organizing the bottles and looked at his coworker. Julio was 23, had 2 small children, only studied through high school. Good guy, hard-working, but carried on his shoulders the weight of someone who knew this job was all he had. Julio, can I ask you something? Sure. If I had cursed him back, yelled, made a scene, what would have happened? Julio thought for a second. You'd have been fired on the spot. Exactly. And I need this job. So there's no point fighting someone who has power. Sometimes the only victory possible is maintaining your dignity. But doesn't it make you angry? It does, Daniel admitted, surprising his colleague. Of course it does. But my mother always taught me one thing. Anger you keep inside destroys you. Anger you throw outside destroys others. So I choose not to let it take over. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She's the wisest person I know. Julio smiled and patted Daniel on the shoulder before returning to work. The hours dragged slowly. Daniel finished reorganizing the section, helped unload a delivery truck, covered a colleague's break at the register. Mechanical, repetitive work that left his mind free to wander, and it always wandered to the same place, the project. For 8 months, Daniel had been developing an intelligent management system for supermarkets. He used machine learning algorithms to predict demand, optimize inventory, reduce waste, improve customer experience. It was complex, innovative, and had the potential to revolutionize retail. 3 weeks ago, he'd presented a beta version to his Columbia professors. They were impressed. So impressed that one of them, Professor Harrison, who had connections with a tech company, arranged a meeting. The meeting would be next week. If that company got interested in the project, everything would change. Not just for him, but for his mother. She could finally stop working as a housekeeper. They could have a better home. She deserved to rest. Daniel, Diane called. Your shift's over. You can go. Thank you, Diane. He grabbed his backpack, changed out of his uniform into a simple t-shirt and jeans, and left through the back door. The bus to Columbia passed nearby. He had artificial intelligence class in an hour. While waiting at the stop, He looked at the supermarket. Through the second-floor window, he could see Samuel Carter's silhouette in his office, talking on the phone, gesturing with irritation. That man had no idea who he'd humiliated today. And Daniel had no idea that in a few weeks, their paths would cross again in a way neither could predict. The bus arrived. Daniel climbed on, swiped his student card, sat in the back. He opened the laptop, reviewed some lines of code from the project, smiled. The humiliation from that day was already filed away in some corner of his memory. Not forgotten, but processed, accepted, transformed into fuel. Because Daniel Hayes knew something Samuel Carter would take a long time to learn. Dignity isn't something others can take from you. It's something you choose to carry no matter what happens. The bus ride home took 40 minutes on good days. That evening, with heavy traffic crawling down Broadway, it stretched to nearly an hour. Daniel pressed his forehead against the fogged window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of yellow and red. Samuel's words still echoed. Incompetent, stupid, not good for anything. He closed his eyes, breathed in slowly, filling his lungs, then released the air even more slowly. It was a technique his mother had taught him as a child, during the hard times. Son, when the world screams at you, breathe. Let God's peace enter before anything else. The bus stopped at the terminal. Daniel got off with dozens of other tired workers, all wearing the same exhausted expression of people who'd sold their entire day for a paycheck that barely covered the bills. He caught the second bus, emptier now, that would take him to the neighborhood on the edge of the Bronx, where he lived with his mother. 20 minutes later, he stepped off onto the cracked sidewalk. It was almost 9 at night. The modest row houses displayed dim lights in their windows. Dogs barked somewhere. From one house came the sound of a television turned up too loud. Children played under a streetlight, squeezing out the last hours before bedtime. The house was the fifth one down. Small, painted a faded yellow, with a rusty iron gate that squeaked when opened. The tiny front yard had 3 potted plants his mother tended with religious care. God made flowers to remind us that beauty doesn't need money, she always said. Daniel turned the key in the lock. The door opened with a familiar creak. Mom, I'm home. Silence. The living room was empty, the television off, but there was light in the kitchen and the unmistakable smell of seasoned beans. He left his backpack on the worn sofa and walked toward the kitchen. Grace was standing with her back to him, stirring a pot on the stove. She was 46, but hard work had aged her. Black hair starting to gray, pulled back in a simple bun. She wore old sweatpants and a cotton shirt. Her bare feet revealed calluses and damaged nails. Mom! She turned and her face lit up with that smile that always transformed everything. It was a tired smile, marked by worry lines and labor, but genuine, full of love. Son, I thought you weren't coming anymore. I was getting worried. She came to him and hugged him. Daniel smelled the familiar scent of laundry detergent and bleach that always clung to her clothes. It was the smell of hard work, of the houses she cleaned, the bathrooms she scrubbed, the floors she waxed. Sorry, Mom. Traffic was terrible. I can imagine. She returned to the stove, turning off the flame. You must be hungry. I made beans the way you like them, with plenty of cilantro. There's rice too, and some pieces of chicken I got on sale. Did you eat? I already ate. I was so hungry I couldn't wait. It was a lie, and they both knew it. She always waited to eat with him, but lied to make sure her son ate enough. Daniel didn't argue. He'd learned some battles weren't worth fighting. He sat at the small kitchen table while she prepared his plate. Her hands trembled slightly from exhaustion as she held the ladle. There was a bandage on her left thumb. What happened to your hand? Oh, that? Nothing. Cut some potatoes at Mrs. Irene's house. She didn't even notice. I took care of it myself. She placed the full plate in front of him. Generous, as always. Thank you, Mom. You're welcome, sweetheart. So, how was your day? The simple question carried all the love in the world. And for the first time since the humiliation, Daniel felt his throat tighten. But he swallowed the emotion along with the first forkful of rice. It was fine. Normal. Grace pulled out the chair and sat across from him. She picked up a glass of water and drank slowly, studying her son's face. She had that gift mothers have, that inexplicable ability to see through words, to read what wasn't said. Daniel Hayes, she said in that tone she'd used since he was little. Don't lie to your mother. He stopped chewing, looked at her, and saw in those tired eyes all the determination in the world. Did something happen at work? For a moment, Daniel thought about continuing the lie, about protecting her from the ugly truth of the world. But looking at this woman who woke up at 5 in the morning, took 2 buses to clean other people's houses, came home at 8 at night with her back aching, and still made dinner for her son, she deserved the truth. The owner showed up today. He humiliated me in front of everyone, called me incompetent, stupid, said I wasn't good for anything. The silence that followed was heavy. Grace didn't say anything for long seconds, just breathed, processing. When she finally spoke, her voice came out low but firm. "And what did you do?" "Nothing. I just apologized and kept working." "Good." She nodded, and there was pride in that simple gesture. "You did the right thing." "Mom, he was so unfair." "I know, son. The world is unfair. But Jesus taught us to love even those who hurt us. He didn't say it was easy. He said it was right." Daniel ate some more, his mother's words soothing the wound still throbbing in his chest. "You have every right to be upset," she continued. "Every right to feel angry, but you can't let that anger take over. Because when we let hatred in, it pushes out everything good. How do you do it, Mom? Work so hard, be treated like a maid, and never complain." She smiled, but there was an old sadness in that smile. "Son, I am a maid. There's no shame in that. Honest work is honest work, whether it's cleaning houses or running companies." She paused. "And as for how I do it, it's because I know I'm not alone. Jesus walks with me. In the houses I clean, on the crowded buses, in the moments when my body hurts so much I want to give up. He's there. Have you ever been angry at God for having to work so hard? I have been. When your father died, I was very angry. I questioned. I yelled. I cried. Her eyes glistened with held-back tears. But then I looked at you, a 6-month-old baby, and I realized God hadn't abandoned me. He gave me you, and you're the greatest blessing I could have." Daniel had to look away. The emotion was too big. "Mom, let me finish." She reached across the table, taking his hand, her rough, calloused hands holding his with infinite tenderness. "You're in college, my son, at Columbia. Do you know how many mothers in this neighborhood can say that? You're smart, hard-working. You're going to have a future I never had. So if you have to put up with a rude boss for now, we'll put up with it. Because this is temporary. But who you are, the character you have, that's forever." The tears Daniel had held back all day finally spilled. Silent, warm, releasing. "I just wish you didn't have to work so hard." "I know, but that's why I work. So you don't have to. So you can have the chance I never had." They sat in silence for a moment. Just mother and son, hands intertwined over an old table, in a simple kitchen, sharing a love that no humiliation could touch. "Should we pray?" she asked softly. "Yes." Grace closed her eyes and began. It wasn't a memorized fancy prayer. It was simple, direct, coming from the heart. "Lord Jesus, thank you for this day. Thank you for work, for health, for food on the table. Thank you for my son, whom you entrusted me to raise. I ask that you comfort him from the harsh words he heard today. Heal his heart from any hurt, and teach that man who wounded him that power without love is nothing. Amen. Amen," Daniel repeated, feeling something reorganize inside his chest. After the prayer, he finished eating. She told him about her day. The house where she worked that day was huge, with 5 bathrooms and 3 living rooms. The employer was polite, but distant, paid on time, which was already a blessing. There were other stories too. A neighbor who was sick, a dog that showed up abandoned on the street. Small details of life that, together, formed the fabric of their daily existence. Daniel washed the dishes while she dried. Then he grabbed his backpack. "I'm going to study a little before bed. Don't stay up too late, son. You need rest. I promise I won't go past midnight." Another gentle lie. They both knew he'd study until at least 2 in the morning. In the tiny bedroom he shared with his books, Daniel turned on the old laptop. The screen flickered a few times before fully lighting up. He desperately needed a new computer, but that was a luxury for later. He opened the project files. Lines and lines of code appeared on the screen. Complex algorithms he'd been developing for months. It was an intelligent management system for supermarkets. It used artificial intelligence to predict buying patterns, optimize inventory, reduce waste, improve customer experience. The irony wasn't lost on him. He worked in a supermarket during the day, was treated as incompetent, and at night created a system that could revolutionize exactly that type of business. Several weeks ago, he'd presented a beta version to Professor Harrison, his advisor at Columbia. The professor had been impressed. So impressed he'd called a contact at an important tech company. "Daniel, this is brilliant," the professor had said. "This isn't student work. This is senior professional work. You have a rare mind." The meeting with the company was scheduled. It would be in less than a week. If they were interested in the project, everything would change. Not just for him, but for his mother. She could finally stop cleaning other people's houses. They could move to a better place. She deserved so much. Daniel worked on the code for hours, adjusted parameters, fixed bugs, improved the interface. The world around him disappeared. There was only him, the computer, and the infinite possibilities that programming offered. It was 2:30 in the morning when he finally stopped. His eyes burned. His head felt heavy. But he'd made good progress. The system was almost ready for presentation. He stood up, stretched his aching body, went to the living room. The house was dark and quiet. He stopped at his mother's bedroom door, left slightly open as always. Grace slept on her side, her breathing soft and regular. Even sleeping, her face carried the marks of exhaustion. Daniel stood there for a moment, just watching. He thought about everything she'd sacrificed. The brutal work, the injured hands, the back that ached, the dreams she'd abandoned so he could dream. "I'm going to change this, Mom," he whispered to the dark room. "I promise I'm going to change it." He went back to his own room but couldn't fall asleep immediately. He lay there, staring at the cracked ceiling, thinking. He thought about Samuel Carter, about the contempt in his eyes, the casual cruelty of his words. He thought about how that man had no idea who he'd humiliated. He thought about how the world worked so unfairly, where good people suffered and bad people prospered. But then he remembered his mother's words. Jesus taught us to love even those who hurt us. It was hard, very hard. But he would try, not for Samuel, but for himself. Because holding on to hatred was too heavy, and he already carried enough weight. Sleep finally came. Heavy, dreamless, necessary. The alarm clock rang at 6 in the morning. Daniel woke with his body aching, but got up. He had to be at the supermarket by 8. He had to catch 2 buses. He couldn't be late. In the kitchen, he found a note from his mother. She'd already left for work. The note said simply, "Left coffee ready. Love you. Trust in Jesus. Mom." Daniel smiled. He grabbed the coffee, ate the bread she'd left, and got ready for another day. But as he picked up his backpack, he looked at the laptop inside. That old machine held a project that could change everything. And in less than a week, he'd have the chance to show it to the world. For now, he was just another invisible stock clerk in a supermarket. But it wouldn't be that way forever. And Samuel Carter, who thought he knew the world, who judged people by the uniform they wore, who confused humility with incompetence, he didn't know it yet. But he was about to learn the most important lesson of his life. The bus arrived, packed. Daniel got on, squeezed between workers who carried the same exhaustion in their eyes. But he smiled, because there inside his backpack, between books and notebooks, was a future nobody could see. Not yet. Samuel Carter hadn't slept well in weeks. That night, he woke at 4 in the morning with his chest tight, and the sensation that the walls of his luxury bedroom were closing in on him. Beside him, his wife Margaret slept peacefully, oblivious to the storm consuming her husband. He got up without making noise, went downstairs to the home office. The mansion in Scarsdale was silent. Even the staff hadn't woken yet. He turned on the computer and opened the spreadsheets that had been tormenting him for months. The numbers didn't lie, and they screamed a truth Samuel refused to accept. His empire was collapsing. Sales were dropping consistently, profit margins shrinking. Modern competition, with their apps and fast delivery, stealing customers every week. And worse, the international investors who'd shown interest now treated him as obsolete. Outdated. The word hammered in his head again like a personal offense. He closed his eyes, massaging his temples. How had he gotten here? He'd built everything from nothing. Started with a modest corner store in Brooklyn, and through hard work and ruthless decisions, transformed it into a respected chain. 5 supermarkets, hundreds of employees, annual revenue in the millions. But none of that mattered anymore. The world had changed, and he hadn't kept up. His phone buzzed on the desk, an email from the accountant. Subject: urgent, critical cash flow. Samuel opened it, read, and felt his stomach turn. They had 3 months, maybe 4, before they'd start missing payroll. After that, it would be a matter of time until bankruptcy. 62 years old, a lifetime of work, and he was about to lose everything. 2 weeks dragged by like 2 years. Samuel tried everything, hired expensive consultants who solved nothing, held endless meetings with managers who had no solutions, cut costs to the bone, laid off employees, eliminated benefits. Nothing worked. The problem wasn't operational, it was structural. His supermarkets operated like they were still in the 90s. No integrated technology, no customer behavior data, no inventory automation. It was like trying to win a Formula One race driving a horse cart. That Thursday morning, he arrived at the office earlier than usual. 7 o'clock. The building was still empty except for the cleaning crew working the lower floors. He sat in the leather chair behind the enormous desk, looked out the window, watching the city wake up. New York teemed with life, with opportunities, with future, and he felt increasingly out of place, a dinosaur watching his own time end. The office phone rang. It was his secretary, Linda. "Mr. Carter, there's a gentleman here from Tech Vision Solutions. Says he has an appointment." Samuel frowned. He didn't remember any appointment, but lately his memory had been failing under the pressure. "Send him in." Who entered wasn't what he expected. A young man, 35 at most, wearing jeans and a dress shirt without a tie. He carried only a tablet. He smiled with that irritating confidence of youth. "Mr. Carter, pleasure. I'm Philip Brennan, commercial director at Tech Vision." He extended his hand. Samuel shook it without enthusiasm. "Mr. Brennan, to be honest, I don't remember scheduling this meeting. I understand. My assistant scheduled with your secretary last week. We spoke about technology solutions for retail." Ah, another dream seller. Samuel had met dozens of these in recent months, all promising miracles, none delivering results. "Look, I don't mean to be rude, but I don't have time for sales pitches. I'm going through a complicated phase and—" "I know exactly what phase you're going through," Philip interrupted, but gently, not aggressively. "Sales down 23% last quarter. Customer loss to digital competitors. Poorly managed inventory causing waste of approximately $200,000 monthly. Cash flow crisis predicted in less than 4 months. Samuel went pale. How did this kid know all that? "How did you—" "Public information, market analysis, and a bit of observation." Philip sat down without being invited. "Mr. Carter, I didn't come to sell anything. I came to present a solution that could save your company." "I've heard that before. I'm sure. But I bet nobody showed you anything like this." Philip turned on the tablet and rotated the screen toward Samuel. "We've developed an intelligent management system for supermarkets. Uses artificial intelligence to predict demand, optimize inventory, map customer behavior, automate orders." Samuel looked at the screen. Graphs, numbers, simulations. It looked impressive, but he was too skeptical. "And how much does this miracle cost?" "Depends. But before we talk numbers, let me show you what it does." Philip began navigating the system. "Look, here you have demand prediction based on history, weather, local events, even social media trends. The system learns on its own. If there's a Yankees game on Sunday, it automatically increases the order for beer and snacks. This exists? It exists, and it works. We have clients reducing waste by up to 40%, increasing sales an average of 28% in the first year." Samuel leaned forward, interested despite his skepticism. "And who created this?" "A genius, young, brilliant Columbia student. Started as an academic project but became a commercial product. We're licensing to select companies." Something inside Samuel stirred, a hint of hope he'd been trying to smother for weeks. "How much?" "For full implementation across your chain, $300,000 initial, plus monthly maintenance fee." The number was high. Very high for someone on the edge of bankruptcy. But if it really worked, can I think about it? Of course. But I need to be honest, Mr. Carter. We have other interested parties. A waiting list, actually. I came here because the system's creator insisted we prioritize traditional American businesses. He has a special fondness for family companies. Who is this creator? Someone I know? Philip smiled enigmatically. Maybe you've already crossed paths. The world is small. He stood up. I'll leave a demo installed on the tablet. You can test it all you want. If you're interested, call me. He left his card on the desk and walked out. Samuel sat alone, staring at that tablet like it was a bomb about to explode. $300,000. It was almost all he had left in reserve. If he invested and it didn't work, he'd be finished. But if he didn't invest and continued as he was, he'd be finished anyway. The following days were an obsession. Samuel tested the system from every angle, simulated scenarios, cross-referenced data, and as he explored, his amazement grew. This was genius, truly revolutionary. The system didn't just manage, it thought, anticipated, learned. It was like having a commercial director working 24 hours a day without ever getting tired. Edward Walsh, the general manager, was equally impressed when Samuel showed him. Mr. Carter, this is science fiction stuff. I know, and it might be our only salvation. Are you going to hire them? Haven't decided yet. It's a lot of money, but if it really works, we'd recover the investment in months. It was true, and Samuel knew it. But the fear of betting wrong, of losing everything, paralyzed him. That night, at home, he talked with Margaret for the first time in weeks about the problems. We're in trouble, Maggie. Real trouble. She, who'd always been too optimistic for his taste, turned serious. How bad? We could lose everything. The silence between them was heavy. Margaret came from old money, married Samuel when he was already established. She'd never known real hardship. And this technology you showed me, won't it solve it? It could, or it could be another scam. Samuel, you built a company from nothing. You've always had instinct for business. What does your instinct say? He thought. Remembered when he started decades ago. An ambitious young man, unafraid to risk, betting everything on a small grocery store. When had he lost that courage? My instinct says it's real, but I'm scared. Scared of what? Of losing? You're already losing. She took his hand. Sometimes, honey, the only way out is forward. The next morning, Samuel called Philip. I want to hire the system, but with one condition. What's that? I want to meet the creator, personally, before I sign any contract. There was a pause on the other end. I can arrange that, but he's shy. Doesn't like spotlights. Doesn't need to be a spotlight. I just want to look in the eyes of the person who's going to save or sink my company. Fair enough. I'll check his schedule. But I can tell you he already knows your supermarkets very well. What do you mean? Leave it as a surprise. Philip hung up. Samuel was intrigued. What kind of tech genius knew supermarkets from the inside? Maybe a former employee. Someone who'd worked for the competition? The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Location, the flagship supermarket itself, after hours. He wants to see the environment where the system will operate, Philip had explained. Samuel agreed. He was anxious, nervous, hopeful. Finally, he'd have answers. Finally, he'd meet the person who could change everything. But he had no idea of the surprise awaiting him. Didn't imagine that the universe had prepared a twist that would force him to face not just his business mistakes, but his mistakes as a human being. The week crawled by. Each day was torture of anticipation. And when the moment of the meeting finally arrived, Samuel wore his best suit, put on his most expensive cologne, and went to the supermarket with his heart beating irregularly. It was time to meet the genius who might save his empire. The supermarket had closed at 10. Samuel arrived half an hour later, when only the security and cleaning crew were still working. He parked the Lexus in the reserved spot and sat still for a moment, looking at the building he'd built with so much pride. This would be the night that defined everything. He took a deep breath, adjusted his tie, grabbed his leather briefcase. His fingers trembled slightly. Nervousness? Expectation? Maybe both. The automatic doors opened with a whisper. Inside, the lights were dimmed to minimum necessary. Empty aisles, organized shelves, the familiar smell of cleaning products and fruit. Edward waited for him at the entrance, accompanied by Philip. "Good evening, Mr. Carter," the manager greeted. There was something strange in his expression, a mix of anxiety and amusement. Edward. Philip. Samuel shook both their hands. Where's the systems creator? Philip smiled that enigmatic way he'd been using since day one. Coming. He asked for a few minutes to prepare. Wants to review the presentation. Perfectionist? Extremely. But that's what makes his work exceptional. Samuel looked around, impatient. He noticed some employees watching from a distance. Diane stood near the deli section, pretending to check something but clearly paying attention. Julio, the bagger, stood near the registers, also watching. Why are so many people still here? Samuel asked. Edward cleared his throat, uncomfortable. Well, the system's creator works here. His colleagues wanted to support him. Works here? Samuel was confused. What do you mean? Is he a manager? Supervisor? Not exactly. Philip exchanged a quick look with Edward. You'll understand in a few seconds. That's when the storage room door opened. Samuel turned, expectant. He expected to see an executive, maybe some manager he'd never noticed before. Someone middle-aged with an intellectual look. What he saw made his heart stop. Daniel Hayes crossed the aisle toward them. He wasn't wearing the supermarket's green uniform. He wore black dress pants, white shirt, understated tie. He carried a laptop under his arm and a thin briefcase. His hair was combed, his posture straight and confident, but it was unmistakably him. The young man Samuel had humiliated weeks ago. The stock clerk he'd called incompetent, stupid, worthless. Samuel felt the blood drain from his face. His legs went weak. He grabbed the edge of the checkout counter to keep from staggering. No! The word came out as a strangled whisper. Daniel stopped a few feet away. His eyes met Samuel's. There was no anger there, no resentment, just a deep calm and something that looked like compassion. Good evening, Mr. Carter, Daniel said, his voice firm but respectful. It's a pleasure to finally meet you formally. The silence that followed was suffocating. Nobody moved. The employees watched with expressions ranging from shock to quiet satisfaction. Diane had her hand over her mouth. Julio smiled openly. Philip broke the silence. Mr. Carter, this is Daniel Hayes, computer engineering student at Columbia, full scholarship, currently top of his class, and creator of the intelligent management system you've been testing. Samuel tried to speak but couldn't. His throat was closed, his mind a chaotic whirlwind. I understand it's a surprise, Daniel said, taking a step forward. When you humiliated me that morning, you didn't know who I was. I was working here specifically to study supermarket operations from the inside, to make my system more efficient. The words were a bomb exploding slowly in Samuel's chest. You were studying me? Studying the business, sir. Not you specifically. Daniel placed his laptop on the counter. I spent 8 months working here. Observed every process, every inefficiency, every problem, and created solutions. Edward stepped closer, placing his hand on Samuel's shoulder in a gesture of support. Sir, I know it's shocking, but Daniel really is a genius. When Tech Vision contacted me saying the system's creator worked at our store, I didn't believe it, but it's true. Everything he showed us works. Samuel finally found his voice, though it came out weak. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me treat you that way? Daniel looked at him with that serenity that had irritated Samuel before but now left him even more unsettled. Because it didn't matter, sir. I knew who I was, knew what I was worth. Your words hurt, but they didn't change who I am. But I called you. I said you were incompetent, stupid, worthless. Daniel completed without anger. Yes, I remember every word, but I also remember what my mother taught me. Who we are doesn't depend on what others say about us. The mention of his mother made something break inside Samuel. He thought about Margaret, how she'd raised him to be better than this. Thought about his own parents, humble workers who never humiliated anyone. Daniel, His voice failed. His eyes filled with tears he tried to hold back. I have no excuse. I was cruel, unfair, treated you like garbage. Yes, you did. The direct agreement, without sugarcoating, hurt more than any accusation, but not out of evil. Out of ignorance. You looked at me and saw only a uniform, never wondered who I really was. A soft murmur rippled through the small group of employees. Someone whispered something. Another nodded slowly. The collective reaction was building, one person at a time. Diane approached timidly. "Can I say something?" Philip nodded. "Mr. Carter, Daniel is the most polite, intelligent, hard-working person I've ever met. He helped everyone, never complained, always had patience. And even after what you did to him, he came back the next day and kept working like nothing happened. I needed the money," Daniel explained simply. "My mother works as a housekeeper to help pay for my studies. I couldn't afford to quit out of wounded pride." Each word was a punch. Samuel remembered his own speech that terrible morning, about how Daniel's generation didn't know how to work, had no effort, wanted everything for free. And here was a young man who worked 12 hours, studied at the best university in the country, created a revolutionary system, and helped his mother who cleaned other people's houses. "Your mother," Samuel began, but didn't know how to continue. "Is the most important person in my life," Daniel said, and there was deep love in those words. "She taught me about Jesus Christ, about loving your neighbor, about forgiving even when it hurts. It was because of her I didn't respond badly to you that day. Because of her. She always says Jesus taught us to treat everyone with dignity, regardless of how they treat us. That love has to be inside us before we can offer it to others." Daniel paused. "I was angry, Mr. Carter. Very angry. But I remembered my mother's prayers, the teachings I received, and I chose not to let anger control me." Behind them, another murmur. Julio stepped forward, unable to stay quiet. "Daniel helped me when my son got sick. Lent me money I know he didn't have to spare. Never asked for it back." Other employees began speaking, one after another. "He taught me math so I could take a civil service exam. Helped me put together my resume. Stayed late teaching me how to use a computer." Each testimony was a blade cutting deeper. Samuel realized everyone there knew Daniel better than he knew any of his employees, because he'd never cared to know them. They were just pieces in a machine. Edward hesitated, opened his mouth, closed it, then finally spoke. "Mr. Carter, I should have stopped you that day, should have defended Daniel, but I was afraid, and I'm sorry for that." The manager's admission hung in the air. It was the first crack in the collective silence that had protected Samuel's behavior. "Daniel," Samuel said, his voice breaking, "I don't deserve your help, don't deserve your system, don't deserve anything from you. This isn't about deserving, sir." Daniel opened his laptop. "It's about doing what's right. My mother taught me that when we have a talent, a gift, we need to use it to help others, not just those we like. Everyone." "But why help me? I was horrible to you." "Because," Daniel looked directly into his eyes, "if I only helped people who were good to me, what difference would I make in the world? Jesus didn't teach that. He taught us to love even our enemies, to do good to those who persecute us." Philip watched everything in silence, but his eyes shone. Edward had tears running down his face without shame. "You're going through difficulties," Daniel continued. "Your business is in crisis. I have the solution. I can choose not to offer it, out of revenge. Or I can choose to offer it, out of love for my neighbor. I choose love." Samuel collapsed. Literally. His legs gave out and he had to sit in a chair Edward brought running. He covered his face with his hands and cried. Not discreet executive tears trying to maintain composure, but deep sobs of a man confronting for the first time in his life his own inner emptiness. "I built an empire," he said between sobs, "but never built character. I have millions, but never had compassion. I'm powerful, but never was good." Daniel knelt beside the chair, getting at eye level with Samuel. "Mr. Carter, it's not too late to change. My mother always says that while there's life, there's time for transformation. You made mistakes, but recognizing that is already the first step. How can you be so good?" "I'm not good, sir. I'm human, with flaws, anger, bad moments. But I choose every day to try to be better, for myself, for my mother, and for Jesus, who gave us the greatest example of love." Samuel wiped his face, trying to recover some composure. "Your system, does it really work?" "It works. I can demonstrate now if you want. And you're still willing to help me? After everything?" Daniel smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. "I am. But with one condition. Anything. That you learn to look at people. Really look. It doesn't matter if they wear uniforms or suits. Everyone has value. Everyone has a story. Everyone deserves dignity. Samuel nodded, unable to speak. Around them, the employees watched in stunned silence. Some had tears in their eyes. Diane pulled a tissue from her pocket. Even the security guard standing by the door seemed moved. "And," Daniel continued, his voice softer now, "I'd like you to meet my mother, because she's the one who taught me all this. And I think you need to hear from her about the love of Christ that transforms." "I would like that very much." Daniel extended his hand. Samuel looked at it. The hand of a young man he'd despised. The hand that created the solution to his problems. The hand offering forgiveness without merit. He took it, and in that simple handshake, something profound happened. Not just a business agreement, but the beginning of a transformation that would change Samuel Carter forever. Philip stepped forward, clearing his throat gently. "Shall we go over the system details? I think everyone here would like to see what Daniel created." Daniel nodded and opened his laptop fully. The screen lit up with the interface he'd been perfecting for months. Graphs, data streams, predictive models. It was beautiful in its complexity. "This system," Daniel began, his voice taking on a professorial tone, "doesn't just track inventory. It learns from patterns. Weather affects buying habits, so it monitors forecasts. Local events drive demand spikes, so it connects to event calendars. Social media trends indicate emerging preferences, so it analyzes that too." Samuel leaned forward, despite himself, drawn in by the explanation. His business mind, even in his emotional state, recognized genius when he saw it. "Show me a scenario," Samuel said quietly. Daniel's fingers moved across the keyboard. "Let's say there's a heat wave predicted for next week. The system would automatically increase orders for cold beverages, ice cream, salads. But it would also slightly decrease orders for hot soup, coffee, items people buy less in extreme heat. All automatically. That's incredible. And here," Daniel clicked to another screen, "you can see waste reduction. The system tracks what spoils, what gets thrown away, and adjusts future orders accordingly. One of our test stores reduced food waste by 42% in just 2 months. Edward whistled softly. "That's thousands of dollars." "Exactly," Daniel confirmed. "And the customer experience improves too. People find what they need. Shelves are stocked appropriately. Lines move faster because checkout systems are optimized." Samuel sat there, absorbing it all. This kid, this young man he'd called worthless, had created something Samuel couldn't even have imagined. Something that could save everything he'd built. "When can we start?" Samuel asked, his voice barely a whisper. Daniel looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it reached his eyes this time. "Whenever you're ready, Mr. Carter. Whenever you're ready." The employees began to disperse slowly, the tension finally breaking. Diane gave Daniel a quick hug. Julio squeezed his shoulder. One by one, they offered their support before heading home. Soon, only Samuel, Daniel, Edward, and Philip remained in the quiet supermarket. "There's paperwork," Philip said practically. "Contracts, implementation schedules. But that can wait until morning." Samuel nodded. He felt exhausted, wrung out, but also somehow lighter than he'd felt in months. "Daniel," he said as the young man began packing up his laptop, "thank you for everything, for your kindness, for your grace, for showing me what I should have been all along." Daniel paused, then looked up. "Mr. Carter, my mother has a saying. She says broken things can be made beautiful again. They just need the right hands to do the mending." He closed his laptop gently. "I think maybe we're both getting mended tonight." And with that, Daniel Hayes walked out into the night, leaving Samuel Carter alone with the weight of his own transformation just beginning. 3 days passed since that transformative night at the supermarket. 3 days during which Samuel Carter barely slept, tormented not by spreadsheets or financial projections, but by memories of who he'd become over the years. That Saturday morning he drove alone through the streets on the edge of the Bronx. The GPS indicated he was close. Grace's house. Daniel had given him the address and extended the invitation, but Samuel was still nervous as a schoolboy before his first exam. In his hands, held carefully on the passenger seat, he carried a simple bouquet of flowers, nothing extravagant. He didn't want to appear like he was trying to buy forgiveness with money. He just wanted to show respect. He parked on the cracked sidewalk. The black Lexus stood out completely against the modest houses around. Some children stopped playing to stare at the car with curiosity. A stray dog barked from a neighbor's fence. Samuel got out, locked the vehicle, took a deep breath. He walked to the rusty iron gate, recognizing the house from Daniel's description. Small, faded yellow, but with a garden tended with evident care in 3 flower pots. Before he could ring the bell, the door opened. Daniel appeared, wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt. He smiled, seeing Samuel there, clearly uncomfortable in that environment so different from his world. "Mr. Carter, welcome." "Daniel, good morning." Samuel raised the flowers, almost embarrassed. "I brought these for your mother. She'll love them. Please come in." The living room was tiny. A worn but clean sofa, an old television, a bookshelf with books and a large Bible in the center. On the walls, photographs. Daniel as a child. Daniel graduating high school. Daniel receiving some award. Each photograph framed with love and pride. "Mom, Mr. Carter is here," Daniel called toward the kitchen. Grace appeared drying her hands on a dish towel. Samuel stood still, observing her. She was a woman in her mid-40s, hair starting to gray, face marked by hard work but illuminated by a genuine smile. She wore simple, homey clothes. Nothing about her suggested she was anyone special, but there was something in her eyes, a deep kindness, a quiet strength, something Samuel rarely saw even in the wealthiest people he knew. "Mr. Carter," she said, and her voice was soft but firm. "How good to meet you. Daniel has told me a lot about you." Samuel swallowed hard. "I imagine not much of it was good." "On the contrary." She approached, and Samuel noticed the calloused hands, the damaged nails, hands of hard work. "My son told me you recognized your mistakes, and that's far more valuable than never making them." The words were simple, but carried a weight that made Samuel's eyes burn. "Mrs. Hayes, I brought flowers. I know it's not much, but they're beautiful." She took the bouquet carefully, as if it were the most precious gift in the world. "I'll put them in water. Please sit down. I made coffee." While she went to the kitchen, Daniel indicated the sofa. Samuel sat on the edge, uncomfortable. Not from disdain, but from feeling he didn't deserve to be there. "She's happy you came," Daniel said quietly. "Said it was important for your healing." "My healing? My mother believes we get sick inside when we hurt others, and we only heal when we seek to do good." Grace returned with a tray. 3 cups of coffee. Homemade cheese bread still warm, butter in a bowl. Simple things, but prepared with care that touched Samuel deeply. "Eat, Mr. Carter. I know it's not what you're used to, but it's made with love." "Thank you." He picked up a cup, took a sip. The coffee was strong, well made. "It's delicious." They sat in silence for a moment. It wasn't uncomfortable silence. It was contemplative, as if everyone was measuring their words. It was Grace who broke the quiet. "Daniel told me what happened at the supermarket, both that terrible day and the meeting after." Samuel placed his cup on the table with trembling hands. "Mrs. Hayes, I have no excuses. I was cruel to your son. Humiliated an extraordinary young man because I was frustrated with my own life. It's unforgivable." "Nothing is unforgivable, Mr. Carter." She spoke with that calm certainty that came from deep faith. Jesus taught us that. He forgave even those who crucified him. How could I not forgive someone who only spoke harsh words? But they were horrible words. "I called your son incompetent, stupid, and it hurt him," she interrupted gently. "Hurt very much. He came home that day and I saw in his eyes that something had happened. He didn't tell me right away, but I knew." Daniel looked down, remembering. "I only told you later, Mom. Didn't want to worry you." "I know, son. You always try to protect me." Grace looked back at Samuel. "But do you know what we did after he told me?" "What?" "We prayed. We prayed for you." Samuel felt as if someone had punched his stomach. You prayed for me?" "Of course. We prayed for God to touch your heart, for you to find peace, for you to learn to see people through Christ's eyes." Tears rolled down Samuel's face without his being able to control them. "I don't deserve that. Don't deserve you praying for me." "It's not about deserving," Grace said, and there was ancient wisdom in those words. "It's about love, and love isn't something we give only to those who deserve it. It's something we give because Jesus lives in us." "My mother always taught me," Daniel added, That when someone hurts us, it says more about the pain that person carries than about us. Exactly, Grace agreed. Mr. Carter, you didn't hurt me because you're evil. You hurt because you were hurting. And hurting people hurt others. Samuel covered his face with his hands. He sobbed openly, without shame. Decades of pride, arrogance, emotional hardness crumbling there, in that small room, before a simple woman who understood more about life than he'd learned in 62 years. I built an empire, he said between sobs, but destroyed my humanity in the process. Stepped on so many people, humiliated so many. And for what? To have money that didn't bring happiness. To have power that only isolated me. The Grace stood, and to Samuel's surprise, sat beside him on the sofa. She placed her calloused hand on his shoulder. But you're here now, and that's already transformation. I don't know how to fix it, don't know how to become a better person. It starts with a choice, she said. Every day, every hour, we choose. Choose to be kind or cruel. Choose to see the other as equal or inferior. Choose to love or choose to judge. It's so hard. It is. Never said it was easy. But it's possible. With Jesus Christ's help, everything is possible. Samuel wiped his face, trying to compose himself. You both talk so much about Jesus. I grew up going to church, but I think I never really understood. Daniel leaned forward. Mr. Carter, Jesus isn't about rules or religion. He's about love. Unconditional love. Love that transforms. Love that forgives. And it's that love, Grace continued, that has to be inside us before we can offer it to others. If we don't have love inside, we can only give anger, judgment, contempt. How do you have so much love? After everything you've been through, you working so hard, your son being humiliated. Grace smiled. It was a smile full of peace. Because I learned my value doesn't come from what I do or how people treat me. It comes from who I am in Christ. I'm God's daughter, and nobody can take that from me. And I learned, Daniel added, that dignity is a choice. You tried to take my dignity that day, but you couldn't, because dignity isn't something others give or take. It's something we carry inside. The words echoed in Samuel's heart like church bells. He thought about how many times he'd tried to steal others' dignity, from employees, competitors, even his own wife with his casual contempt. I want to change, he said, his voice firm now. I want to be different, but I don't know where to start. Start here. Grace touched his chest, in the heart, asking Jesus to enter, to clean everything that's rotten and plant good things. Can I do that, after everything? Of course. Jesus' heart door is always open. Doesn't matter what we've done. He always receives us. There was a moment of deep silence. Then Grace asked, May I pray with you? Samuel nodded, unable to speak. She took his hands. Daniel joined them, closing the circle. And there, in that humble living room, began a prayer that would change Samuel forever. Lord Jesus, Grace began, her voice soft but powerful, receive our brother Samuel. He comes with a broken heart, recognizing his mistakes. Heal the wounds he carries. Teach him to love as you love. Show him that power without love is empty, that wealth without compassion is worth nothing. Transform him, Lord, not in appearance but in essence. Make him a new man. Amen. Amen, Daniel repeated. Amen, Samuel whispered, tears flowing silently. When they opened their eyes, something had changed. Samuel couldn't explain exactly what, but he felt lighter, as if a weight he'd carried for decades had been lifted from his shoulders. They talked for more than 2 hours. Grace told her story, her husband's early death, the struggle to raise Daniel alone, the hard jobs, the humiliations suffered over the years. But I never lost faith, she said, because I knew God had a purpose. And look at my son now, in university, creating incredible things. It was all worth it. You should be proud, Samuel said. I am, but not of his degree or his project. I'm proud of the man he is, of the heart he has. That's the real achievement. When Samuel stood to leave, he felt like a different person from the one who'd arrived. At the door, Grace hugged him. It was a maternal hug, welcoming, that he hadn't received in decades. Come back anytime, Mr. Carter. Our house is simple, but our door is always open. Thank you, Mrs. Hayes, for everything. especially for teaching me what really matters in life. In the car, before starting the engine, Samuel sat for long minutes. He looked at that yellow house through the rearview mirror. 2 people lived there. Simple people, without luxuries, without material wealth. But they had something he'd never had. True peace, genuine love, faith that sustained. The weeks that followed brought changes. Not just in the business, where Daniel's system began showing extraordinary results, but mainly in Samuel. He arrived earlier at the supermarket, not to inspect, but to talk. He learned every employee's name, asked about their families, dreams, problems. When he saw someone working hard, he stopped to thank them. When he noticed injustice, he corrected it. When he made mistakes, he apologized. The employees, initially suspicious, began to respond. The environment changed. There were more smiles, more lightness, more humanity. Edward commented in a meeting, "Mr. Carter, productivity has increased 30%, not just because of the system, but because people are happy to work here." Samuel smiled. It was different from his old arrogant smile. It was genuine, humble. "I learned that happy people work better, and treating people well isn't weakness, it's intelligence." Months later, on a sunny Sunday, Samuel visited the small church Grace attended. He sat on the simple wooden bench, heard the pastor preach about love and forgiveness, sang off-key hymns, and for the first time in decades, he felt he was in the right place. At the end of the service, Grace approached. "Mr. Carter, what a blessing to see you here. Thank you for showing me the way, Mrs. Hayes. I didn't show anything, just shared what Jesus taught me. The rest was the Lord working in your heart." Samuel looked around. Those simple people, with their modest clothes, their genuine smiles, their unshakable faith. They had something he'd sought his whole life in the wrong places. "You know what I learned?" he said to Grace. "I learned that I humiliated your son at that supermarket because I felt small inside myself. I learned that power and money don't fill the void. I learned that love has to be inside us before we can offer it to others. And I learned all this from you and Daniel. And what will you do with that learning?" "I'll live differently, not perfectly. I know I'll still make mistakes. But I'll try every day to choose love, choose kindness, choose to see people as Christ sees them." Grace smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "That's all Jesus asks of us, that we try, that we choose love, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Daniel joined them, hugging his mother's shoulder. "You know, Mr. Carter, that day at the supermarket was horrible. But looking now, I see it was necessary, because it brought us here. God uses even our pain to transform us," Grace added. "Nothing is wasted in His hands." Samuel looked at that mother and son, united, strong, full of love, and he realized they'd given him the greatest gift, not the technological solution that saved his business, but the life lesson that saved his soul. True wealth wasn't in bank account numbers. It was there, in the capacity to love, to forgive, to see dignity where others saw only uniforms, to carry Christ's love inside, to be able to offer it to the world. And as they left that simple church together, under New York's warm sun, Samuel Carter was finally a truly rich man.